Skills are things that I can use the knowledge that I have gained to improve, make less mistakes by understanding the patterns of failure, and by constantly using the knowledge base that I have, I become better at the job. Okay? The next is processability, and this is easy. Processability is anything that I can transfer out to someone else under my mentoring. And I can bring this person up to speed without his or her spending too much time on understanding the aspect of the knowledge. So a transferable knowledge, transferable skill is a processability. Okay? So any knowledge or any skill that I can easily transfer out to a protege who is assigned to me is a processability. Like for instance, I can code out how inspections are to be done. It's a transferable skill. But how to be a moderator is a skill. How do I do conflict negotiations? How do I bring in a timeout for situations that are going out of control is a skill. Okay? That the person can gather as he goes along. But a transferable skill or transferable knowledge is a processability. Okay, I'm just going to pick one or two of you volunteers because we are kind of getting closer to the closure time. If any one of you wants to share what your competency dictionary item looks like, this is a competency dictionary, by the way. Would anybody wish to volunteer? Go ahead, please.
Educator.
Okay.
Knowledge, required, desire, and expected openness.
Mm-hmm.
Skills required, being to learn, and
Expected.
that I will practice what I've learned. And then process abilities required that I gain experience, and expected that I'll have determination.
Determination. Okay. All right. So if you go and do this for all educators in your organization, you get a competency dictionary for educators. So that's a profile we just created. Okay? Do this, take this exercise back into your organization, stratify it into domains and clusters, and you have a competency dictionary. And let me tell you one thing, you'll be amazed you already have it. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing staffing. It's written in loose English text, not bucketed into knowledge, skills, and processabilities. All you got to do is go and ask the HR to give you the recruitment manual. It'll all fall in place. Okay? Let's move on. The next is organizational capability management, the purpose of which is to quantify and manage the capability of the workforce in the critical competency-based processes. Now, the key here is organizations would have definitions for process life cycles. All high maturity organizations ought to have it, otherwise they are not deemed to be level 5. So you have an agile life cycle, and they have some phases, and they have waterfall or spiral as the case may be. And projects are continuously run using these life cycles, and they produce numbers. Those numbers get into a measurement database, and somebody whips up some magic and does some analysis and tells you this is what your capability is on your agile life cycle, and this is what is your capability on waterfall or spiral. For instance, the defect tendency. What's the missing link? The missing link is we only have the process side of the data that has been captured. The thing PCLM asks you to do, which is I think extremely critical if you want to sustain maturity, is what type of workforce capability you need to have in order to get these numbers. Right? Can I take the gold medalist of the recent Olympics swimming and define that as a goal for all other novice swimmers? The answer is no. So who is the workforce capability that is the contributor for these numbers? The context information, which is so critical and crucial of measurement and analysis, doesn't exist in the CMMI constellations, which is what the PCMM does for you. And by the same token, quantitative performance management is to predict and manage. So this was quantify and manage, this was predict and manage, and a close cousin of quantitative performance management is quantitative project management. Do the same thing. For a new project that is going to start out, you use the measurement database that's relevant for that life cycle, and the same goes on for waterfall and spiral. So you need to stratify your measurement databases based on the types of projects that are in execution, right? So you've got to have a homogeneous mixture of projects which yield you the measurement. This is what quantitative project management asks you to do, and it stops again and again. What is the workforce capability impact that is going to have on the measurement database, without which you're not going to get this prediction and management of the capability, as the PCMM sounds. Okay? So by adding the workforce impact as a consequence of workforce capability, it consciously brings in the two dynamics together. This quantification is nice, but when can I see this quantification realized as real objectives? And that you need to have the workforce capability. And one of the prerequisites for that is to establish this competency dictionary. You need to know how knowledge, skills, and possibilities looks at least for three types of people: novices, journeymen, or those who are proficient, and finally the experts. Stratify it, and then you will get some sense for what workforce capability is. And finally, organizational performance alignment. Every process program has a start and a finish line. And you start with business objectives, and you use a performance improvement roadmap, like I told you in that case study. And then you go about asking for both proactive and opportunistic improvements, and then you align them in some sense. I mean, certain things which are nice to have can be done immediately. You need not wait for a cycle of a quarter to kind of do the definitions. And you do that constantly. You do that constantly till you get to make sure that your performance improvement opportunities are fully exploited to realize the benefits of the business objectives that you set for yourself. Okay, that's organizational performance alignment. Now, I will kind of take the next few slides as they come, but they are there in the slide deck because we have maybe 5 more minutes to close out. These were just the filler slides in case we ran out of space, but these are all there. And it is going to tell you pretty much the same things that I have told you, which is that there's a close correlation between competency analysis and competency development and the CMMI constellation. And the emphasis is on knowledge, skills, and process abilities. And we go with quantitative performance management. It positively impacts quantitative project management. We saw all that. And organizational capability management definitely impacts organizational process performance. And we understood the impact of having a process context information, which is the workforce capability information. Otherwise, metrics is a waste, right? And then next, we understood that organizational performance alignment happens for a reason in high maturity because of performance management and causal analysis. But you get the workhorse of taking recourse to both proactive and opportunistic improvements. Okay? Now, read up the rest of the content here because it's useful to know that in PCMM, you actually do analysis at multiple levels. We don't stop at the organizational level. The measurement database itself gets enriched. We do it at the project level. And when you take recourse to using PSP, you take it down to the individual level. So individuals start challenging the averages. Why did you set me 10 defects per K-log as the defect density? I can produce 3 defects per K-log. So individuals take down the measures to their own levels of detail. And that's when you get an empowered work culture. Okay, and the reason why this works is because from a sponsorship perspective, the idea behind both high maturity enactments of the CMMI and the PCMM is twofold, which is to ensure minimizing variation and to bring in consistency. And this can happen only when process stakeholders collaborate with competency stakeholders, meaning those who have the reasons to champion the cause of CMMI collaborate with those who have reasons to champion the PCMM. If anything, I think you must at least consider these 5 process areas. There are other process areas in the PCMM which are equally well qualified to address many of the process challenges. But I think these are the 5 sufficiency conditions. What we know from the CMMI, those 4 process areas are the necessary conditions, but these 5 process areas are the sufficiency conditions if you want to sustain high maturity. And it's only when you do this can you get your high maturity rolling endlessly. And it becomes a joy for everyone who is on the ride. Otherwise, it can be a pain in everyone's neck. Okay. With that said, I have a few more slides, but I would urge you to take a look at the presentation deck when it becomes available. Thank you so much for participating. I hope you are now aware that you are unconsciously doing many of the PCMM aspects. May not be to the rigor that I spoke of, but it at least forms an element in the fabric of your process. So take it to the next level of enactment. Okay? Thank you so much. Still have about 3 minutes left for Q&A.
The idea that, I mean, you're right, I think CMMI focuses on the process, PCMM focuses on the people. Why do you think that that was the intention?
Well, I think a PCMM, as I was told by Dr. Bill Curtis, who is the author of the model, happened by an accident. He made a paper presentation in one of the SEPG conferences way back in the 1990s, 94, 95 timeframe. And it was called the People CMM. And that paper became a model. And one of the reasons why PCMM was not so heavily hammered on is because you have a lot of humanistic aspects. And unfortunately or fortunately, you may say it is a humanistic model, but humanistic aspects in the organization are alive. They are very much the reasons why we have so many issues, right? So I think one of the resistances is because you don't want to touch on the hot buttons of individuals. Like for instance, competency analysis. If I were to do a competency analysis of a person and say he's only level 1 on knowledge, that might offend this person. In a more nurturing environment, in a more caring environment, where individuals are geared towards competency development, it happens naturally. They'll obviously tell you they don't know anything about it, because that's an opportunity to go for a training class and learn. There are several cultures which are more pardoning of ignorance. There are more cultures that are quite insulated. They don't like to hear the bad truth. And nobody wants to confess that they don't know enough about something that they really have a fleeting knowledge.
So without the people perspective, then do you think that CMMI is really limited?
In my opinion, yes. In my opinion, at all levels there's a gap. They have to plug it with the PCMM framework. Because if you don't engage practitioners, who is going to hold forth for you as the process stakeholders? So at all levels, level 2 to level 5, there are chinks in the puzzle. But the good news is you have the PCMM, which is a derivative of the capability maturity model. And I was actually trying hard to find this book by Tom DeMarco, and it's available here in the store, The Peopleware, and I got it after strenuous searches. This book goes at length about talking to building a sociological system in the organization and less of a process-driven systemic work culture. Yeah, thanks. Question?
Yeah. So if you have a level 5 organization with CMMI dev, but no knowledge of the people CMM, would you recommend to start all over from level 2 of people CMM, or just work on the 5 PAs you just described?
I would say if you are genuinely a high maturity level 5 on the CMMI dev, you would be doing pretty much all of these things, but you would lack the robustness. You would say my defect tendencies is 3 defects per K-log, but for what type of resource mix?
So the organization would just read the people CMM 5 process area and see if they are doing with the practices, and if they are missing something, would they have to start from scratch, from level 2, or what would be the possible scenario?
Okay, the possible scenario is twofold. if you have a high maturity appraised level 5 organization, much of the resource requirements are already met because these are all embedded in your generic